So welcome back to another video here in Pennsylvania, and today we're going to talk a bit about what's called Pontiac's War, which in a lot of ways is a continuation, or you can think of it as a sequel to the French and Indian War. Because I'm not done filming on the French and Indian War. There's still quite a few more things I want to get to. Some of those things are just a little bit further away from where I live, so I got to take longer trips for those. Like just recently we finally finished the Forbes expedition. Before I continue, I want to quick show you a little buddy I met on the trail just a little ways back. But check out this little dude on the trail. Well, he sees us. It's actually the juvenile stage of what's called the red-spotted salamander. They're often referred to as red efts in this stage. Hey, little buddy. He wants nothing to do with me. There he goes. We'll let him go. Yes, it was cool to run into him. That's the first one I've seen this summer. Usually see quite a few more of them, but it's been dry. But just recently we got quite a bit of rain, so I think they like when the rains come, then they kind of make their way out of the forest. So all my videos concerning Pontiac's War, including this one, I'm going to include in my playlist, or in my series on the French and Indian War. Because like I said, in a lot of ways, it's just a continuation of that story, of that event. And as with the French and Indian War, I'm going to be focusing mostly on what happened in Pennsylvania. Like with the French and Indian War, on a worldwide scale, it's called the 7 Years' War. Between France and Britain, battles were fought all over the world, including other nations, Spain, Russia, Austria, Prussia, all these nations got involved, but we just have been focusing on what happened here in Pennsylvania. And I'll do the same with Pontiac's War. It was fought on a larger scale than here in Pennsylvania, just here in the New World, but like I said, we'll focus on what happened here in Pennsylvania. So the French and Indian War, or the 7 Years' War, officially ended in 1763. I think it's called the Treaty of Paris. I didn't really do a video on that because it didn't really affect Pennsylvania all that much. Hostilities pretty much ended here in Pennsylvania by 1760, even a little bit earlier. By Forbes expedition, things had calmed down quite a bit, especially here in the eastern part of the state. But obviously in other areas, like I said, around the world, the war had continued until 1763. But in that treaty, France gave up all rights to the land in the Ohio Valley in Canada. What had been called New France. They gave that up, and the British took control. And unfortunately, as the way it goes in history, people don't learn from other people's mistakes. The fellow in charge of that area, the British guy who was in charge of dealing with that change and dealing with the Native Americans, his name was Jeffrey Amherst. And history doesn't look too kindly on him, to be honest. He made a lot of the same mistakes that other British officials and generals made too. So under the French, the Native Americans had been treated more like allies, or more as equals. But under British rule, of course we're talking about an area known as New France, the area of the Ohio Valley and parts of Canada that the British took over. The Indians were used to a certain way of doing things with the French, but the British did things very differently. They thought they knew better how to treat the Native Americans, and that backfired. Yeah, going back to that Jeffrey Amherst guy, he was told by several people, hey, this is how you should work with the natives, and this is how things are done. Did he listen? No, he did things his own way. Reminds me a lot of when we did the videos on General Braddock, Braddock's defeat. How he was warned when he came over about things, about how the Indians and the French fought, and he thought he knew better. He didn't listen to those people. He thought he was, invincible or something, Almost there's an arrogance there. Well, he learned the hard way, and so did Amherst. He treated them with more disdain, like a conquered people. And in some ways they had been defeated, the ones that had allied with the French. but he ignored their customs. He did not treat them as equals. He treated them as a lesser people, and that created a lot of resentment among the natives, to say the least. And so there was a rebellion. Sometimes it's called Pontiac's Rebellion instead of Pontiac's War. And it comes from the name, Pontiac is one of the Indian chiefs in the Great Lakes area region. Yeah, the majority of the tribes that were part of that rebellion at war were from that area. However, it did end up pouring into Pennsylvania again. It has a lot of similarities to that French and Indian War period. Once again, there were a lot of attacks and massacres along the frontier, especially even some in this area. Once again, I'm here in southeastern PA. One of the most notable ones involved the massacre of a teacher and 10 schoolboys down in Franklin County. We'll get to that one soon, I think, this summer. And during that war, a number of British forts were taken, quite a few soldiers killed, settlers killed, a lot of them fled the area. Once again, Amherst underestimated the Native Americans. He thought they posed absolutely no threat to the British in the area, and he was proved very wrong. There were a couple of forts in Pennsylvania that were captured. 3 of them were formerly French forts, which I haven't gotten to yet. I want to visit those. They were French forts during the French and Indian War, but when the French lost, they became British forts. Their French names, well, one on the coast, Lake Erie, there was Fort Presque Isle. Then it was Fort Le Boeuf and Fort Machault. I think that's the order that they go into. Fort Machault was later named Fort Venango, I think. I think that's the way it went. But those were captured by the Native Americans, and they laid siege to Fort Pitt, which was Fort Duquesne. We visited there twice, because after the Forbes expedition, they renamed Fort Duquesne Fort Pitt. And I am hoping to get to those 3 formerly French forts. It would be nice to get there this summer. They're kind of up in the northwestern part of PA. So it'd be cool to get up there. Like today, we're all, of course, after the French and Indian War, they became British forts, but they were captured during Pontiac's War. A lot of soldiers were killed. I think in Fort Presque Isle, a number of them were promised safe passage to get out of the area, but then they were betrayed, captured, a lot of them killed too. So yeah, but we'll talk about that in future episodes. Like I said, Fort Pitt then was under siege, and someone you're familiar with was sent on a mission to relieve Fort Pitt. The name you should be familiar with, Colonel Henry Bouquet, who was a big part of the Forbes expedition. He was sent on an expedition to relieve Fort Pitt in 1763. I should mention that. I never mentioned the dates. Pontiac's War lasted from 1763 to 1764. It's about a year. But yeah, on his way to relieve Fort Pitt, he was attacked. About 500 Native Americans that had Fort Pitt under siege left that area to encounter Colonel Bouquet. They knew he was coming, and others joined that group. And there was a big battle not too far from Pittsburgh, the Battle of Bushy Run. But in the future, I will do a whole video on the Battle of Bushy Run. It was a very important battle. Bouquet and the British troops did win that battle. They did suffer heavy losses, but they were able to win. And then they were able to relieve Fort Pitt. And then several other Pennsylvania forts that we've been to were attacked as well. Fort Ligonier, which we just visited recently, and then Fort Bedford, which was also known as Fort Raystown. Those are both attacked, but never actually captured or defeated. But unfortunately for the settlers along the frontier, this was basically a repeat of the years, 1755 to 1758, when the Native Americans had been coming through the gaps in the mountains and attacking, massacres and stuff like that. So things had quieted down. Like I said, by 1759, a lot of that had quieted down here in parts of Pennsylvania, but then in 1763, it all kicked back up again. But like I said earlier, I'm not done with the French and Indian War, but I wanted to introduce Pontiac's War because there's things concerning Pontiac's War that I want to film as well. I had been avoiding those things until a little bit later here, when I'd gotten most of my French and Indian War stuff done. I know a lot of people confuse the two. Several people asked me, hey, why haven't you done the Battle of Bushy Run yet? Well, because technically the Battle of Bushy Run was during Pontiac's War, not the French and Indian War, but people get that confused. Because I've been out there several times already, right near it. Along with some of the other massacres that have happened, I want to be able to cover those, because some of those lakes that are close by to where I live, especially that school one. So introducing Pontiac's War now will allow me to get to those stories and those battles as well. Like I said, I'm going to include Pontiac's War in my French and Indian War series. Like I said, in a lot of ways, it is a sequel to that whole event. Yeah, but eventually Jeffrey Amherst was replaced, which was a good thing. He basically got blamed for that war then. He was replaced by Thomas Gage, who showed a lot more wisdom in dealing with the Native Americans. He dealt with them a lot more respectively, recognizing and acknowledging their customs and the way they do things. And he did things in such a way that allowed them to bury the hatchet in a respectful manner to them. In other words, to give up the fighting. So he worked out a situation with them that would please them, you know, without humiliating them even further, I guess you could say, which is what Amherst should have done, but he took that more arrogant approach to things. So like I said, I just wanted to get this video out so I can get to some of those stories and events from Pontiac's War as well. Just kind of want to introduce it to you. Like, I think I want to get to that school one pretty soon. It's not too far from where I live. I forget the name of the place offhand. I just looked up the other day. Actually, one of the boys survived the scalping, which is almost kind of horrifying in of itself. Alright, but I think that'll be it for this video. Like, there's a lot more to say about Pontiac's War, but I will talk about that in future episodes. Like I said, I'm not done with the French and Indian War stuff either. So I got more stuff to do with that. And I probably never will be done, because like I said, you always, the more research you do, the more stories you find out, there's always more videos to make on it, on things you learn and discover. But anyway, folks, I think that'll be it for this little walk and chat about history. Just out here on the Appalachian Trail between Route 645 and 501 here in Berks County. Might get some thunderstorms in a bit, so I should probably get off this mountain. But there's like kind of a gap in the rain, so I thought I'd come out here for a little hike. Alright folks, thanks, as always, thanks for watching, and hopefully we'll see you on the next one.